Afternoon Retro Raiders, I'm Roadkill as always. Now, a lot of you have probably heard of this game and a lot of you probably haven't, but those of you who have are probably aware of how, well, I'm just going to come out and say this is a bad game. It's not among the worst games I've ever played, but it definitely be enough to score low on anybody's record. But anyway, this game is called Bubsy. It was it was released on Sega Megadrive and the Super Nintendo. Um, and I think it was given a sequel as well. I don't know how many platforms that game made it to, and how it spawned a sequel I'm not sure of. But anyway, Bubsy was it was like a cute cartoonish kind of cat sort of character, probably meant to be a mascot, probably for Sega, or maybe not since it was released on Nintendo. And he was obviously meant to be a mascot of some form, but he failed miserably. He definitely tried to be Sonic. Yeah, definitely tried to compete with Sonic and just failed. Just didn't do any of the things right that Sonic did. He'd run around collecting yarn balls instead of rings, which isn't common. A lot of characters, a lot of video games have an iconic sort of item that you have to run around and collect, hundreds upon hundreds of. But in Bubsy, they don't even seem to serve a purpose. In any other game, you'd get 100 of them, and they'd reset to 0 and then give you a 1-up. But in Bubsy, no, nothing. It just carries on counting them, and it gives you some extra score. But from what I can tell, the score doesn't actually do anything. You don't even get extra lives from score, which kind of makes the score system and the yarn balls just completely pointless. The lives, speaking of lives, the lives are plentiful, but well, you start out with like 9 of them, but they vanish pretty quickly, and while extra lives are scattered around the levels, they're pretty hard to find, and the levels are quite big and maze-like, and it turns into one of those, where the hell do I go games. And it does that pretty fast. The levels are too long, they're too big, there's too many different ways to go, and you get lost and confused pretty easily. But fundamentally, it's always get from the left side of the screen to the right, but it's never a straight path. You've always got to go through like doorways and find switches and stuff, which is fine when it's done right. A lot of games do that, but Bubsy just managed to make it as infuriating as hell. Yeah, the reason your lives disappear so quickly is because my favourite, one-hit deaths. Yeah, absolutely beautiful. You get hit once and you die and you go back to the last checkpoints, and the checkpoints are pretty spaced out. It's not stingy with its checkpoints, but they don't come nearly as often as you'd like them to in a game where you die from one hit. And Bubsy can't really defend himself very well either. He can jump on enemies like Sonic can, but that's about it. He can't spin dash or anything like that. He's got no punches and kicks. He's a cat and he can't even use his frigging claws. Jesus. This is an absolute joke of a character. The continues are pretty hard to find as well. Yeah, well, but you might say that's fair with continues, and they're not really needed that much because the game has a password system. But the password system's kind of infuriating to figure out. I mean, when the title screen comes up, you expect to just press start and then the menu comes up, but no, the game just starts right away. And I had to reset the console a few times before I discovered that when the title screen appears, you press select and then the main menu appears, and then you can like change control settings and whatnot. And there's of course a password entry down there, and the password entry, you scroll down to it, you put the letters in, double check it, make sure it's right, press start, and guess what? It takes you to level 1. Yeah, takes you all the way back to the beginning of the game. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how far you get. Don't bother writing that password down. Well, that's how it appears at first. But I eventually figured out that after you figure out about the almost hidden main menu screen, after you put the password in, you don't press start. Instead, you press select again, and it'll show you the number of the stage that the password is meant to take you to, and then you press start and it'll take you to that level. Like, why does it need to be like that? Like, what were they thinking? Did they not play any other game that incorporated a main menu or a password system? Just have the menu appear on the screen, have the password system there, put in 4 or 5 numbers and letters, and then press start. It's as simple as that. It's the simplest thing imaginable. But some people just can't get it right. Some people can't even get that right. And when you can't even get that right, it's not gonna bode well for the rest of the game, is it? No, and I was talking about one-hit deaths earlier. Try fighting a boss. How fun do you think it is fighting a boss that takes 4 or 5 hits and flies around the screen when you can't even get hit once? And although I only played it a couple of hours, which was enough to only get to the end of the second stage, which is actually consists of 3 levels. That consists of 3 levels each. So I got to like chapter 7, I think, eventually. But yeah, all through those levels, the enemies were pretty much just repeated, just the same stupid, puffy-cheeked little stupid head minions that just blow at you and occasionally throw eggs and stuff like that. That was pretty much all I saw. There was 1 or 2 others that appeared very scarcely, and my favourite is that the boss is even repeated. Although I think there was only 1 of them in the first level. I can't really remember, but it's basically just like a flying saucer made from a giant ball of yarn. And then the second boss was just the same thing, but there was 2 of them. And again, try killing 2 of those things flying around the screen when you can't even get hit once yourself. It's an incredibly frustrating game. If you like a challenge, then go for it, but it's not the kind of challenge that you feel like... It's just not rewarding. It doesn't feel like you're getting anything out of it, like other games do, like Sonic and like Mario. Not that I'm overly familiar with Mario. Just Christ. Yeah, there's very few enemies. Look at a game like Sonic. Look at the amount of enemies that game has. I mean, just the first one, not even the whole series. Another thing that bugs me is that some hazards don't look like hazards, like the giant ice creams. The first time you see these things, you'll just walk into them trying to pick them up, only to get, of course, instant killed. Well, that's real fair, isn't it? not to mention there are spikes scattered all over the place, and a lot of the time you can't even make them out. It might be more clear if you're playing it on an emulator, but I play it on an actual console with a TV, and it's a little bit blocky. But yeah, a lot of the times you just end up dying and you're not even really sure what did it. There's a lot of projectile throwing enemies that function when they're not on the screen, so by the time they come onto the screen they're already attacking. Their projectiles come onto the screen and just hit you square in the face and kill you, and this happens often. It's hard to avoid. It's friggin' frustrating, honestly. It's like they didn't even, it's like the game was barely even tested, really. Like somebody actually thought this game was good enough to put out, and that just makes you sick. What were they thinking? What were they thinking with this giant piece of barracuda balls? That's the only word I can come up with that's harsh enough to describe it without, sitting here spewing out profanities. It's just absolutely awful. Yeah. To give it its full name, I think it was called Bubsy the Bobcat in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, or something like that. It had a weird name. But anyway, Bubsy on the Sega Megadrive and the Super Nintendo. I'd give it a 4 out of 10. You might think I'm being generous there, and maybe I am, but it could have been capable of a lot more. It just needed to be ironed over a bit more. A bunch of the flaws just needed to be ironed out and some of the problems removed, and it could have been a decent platformer had they put a bit more thought and creativity into it also. But yeah, I've played worse, but Christ, I've played better. I'm hoping to review Super Metroid eventually, because that's a game I've kind of played it. I played it years ago when I was a teenager, through emulation and stuff. But I'm looking to play it legitimately, and I haven't actually looked if it was released in the UK or not. So, but if it is, I'm hoping to eventually play that. It might mean having to get a region 3 upgrade for my Super Nintendo, which I might end up doing anyway. So, but anyway, it might happen eventually, but it might take some time. Thanks for watching, guys and girls. I'll see you next time.